Hello everyone, my name is Ariel Cardiel and I was assigned Federalist paper 7 and 8, both of which were penned by Alexander Hamilton. Paper 7 is titled The Consequences of Hostilities Between the States, and paper 8 is titled Concerning Dangers from Dissensions Between the States. Once it became clear that the Articles of Confederation were not working, delegates from the states met for the Constitutional Convention to discuss how they could revise the Articles. The delegates negotiated the Great Compromise, drafting our Constitution as we know it today, but before it could take effect, it had to be ratified. The push for ratification led to the Great Debate, with Federalists in support of the Constitution and Anti-Federalists in opposition to it. Leading the Federalist camp was Alexander Hamilton, who, along with John Jay and James Madison, published the 85 essays known as the Federalist Papers, and they drafted these to explain the entire document, but also to convince the delegates to ratify the Constitution. Paper 7 is the continuation of a discussion that began with Federalist Paper number 6. Both papers review possible sources of conflict between the states in absence of a national government. Hamilton begins with the argument that the same grounds used to justify war between nations will be used between the states if they become disjointed and if the restraints of a federal constitution are removed. He brings attention to the vast tract of territory in the nation yet to be settled and claims that if the Union dissolves, the states would go to war over territorial claims. As an example, he highlights the tension between Connecticut and Pennsylvania in respect to the lands of Wyoming. Hamilton goes on to say that there will be trade disputes between each of the states. He writes, each state or separate confederacy would pursue a system of commercial policy peculiar to itself. This would occasion distinctions, preferences, and exclusions, which would beget discontent. Another situation in which competing interests between the states could lead to war involves public debt accrued by the war. Hamilton claims that the states would debate endlessly as to which state would pay what, that the citizens would avoid making any payment at all, and that foreign powers would grow impatient in settling their debt with the United States. Consequently, the peace of the states would be subject to internal contention and external invasion. Lastly, Hamilton discusses the passage of laws impairing the obligation of contracts. For example, you sign a contract with someone from another state, but the other state nullifies that contract, and just goes over basically that without a judge to cover all of these issues and to settle disputes, that war would be the most likely outcome. Moving on from paper 7 to paper 8, Alexander Hamilton discusses the consequence of state conflict and warfare. He argues that with a wide open frontier and no defenses to protect against military advance, that American wars would be more bloody than any that had occurred in Europe. Due to the heightened risk of invasion, standing armies would become a necessity, and this would only make people less free and would further aggravate wars among the states. While Anti-Federalists complained that the new system threatened liberties and failed to protect individual rights, Hamilton argued that by failing to adopt the Constitution, it would lead to chaos. A system of tyrannical militarism and monarchy would develop in response, as a strong executive is typically necessary during times of war. He says that the frequency of invasion will make people less likely to protest their lack of liberties. And Hamilton's logic proceeds that the United States can prevent internal wars by becoming united as a country rather than falling apart and battling against each other. In many ways, I feel that this logic applies to intergovernmental relations. We've learned about dual federalism, which holds that the federal and state governments both have power over individuals, but that their power is limited to separate and distinct spheres of authority. But I think that Hamilton would have argued for cooperative federalism and collectively working together to solve problems. He argued for the states to come together as one nation to solve their problems, so why wouldn't he argue for other areas of government working together? Let me know what you think.